Okay, hi everybody. I think we can get started. For those who we haven't met, I think I know many of you on this call. Good to see those of you who I already know. For those who don't know me, my name is Tara Deegan. I oversee government relations and community affairs for DEP citywide. I've worked extensively on long-term control plan projects, not as much as the speakers you'll hear tonight, Keith Mahoney and Angela Licata. Our Deputy Commissioner for the Bureau of Planning and Environmental Planning and Analysis. You guys probably have met them as well, and they are much more well-versed in this particular topic than I am. So we're here tonight to explain to you what we're doing with the Harlem River use attainability analysis. And so for me, this was actually very complicated for me to grasp this and understand it. I think it's a little bit of a complicated topic. We're going to try to explain it as best we can. Many of you, I know I've seen many familiar faces. You're much smarter than me. I know that. So you might already be ahead of the game. But for anybody that's new to this, we'll try to explain this as best we can on what the goal of our UAA is and what the goal of this reclassification is and what we're looking to do in the Harlem River, and some of the pros and cons to what's going to be happening with the Harlem River. So we'll explain a little bit of that. If you wouldn't mind holding your questions until after the presentation is done, that would be great. Hopefully we'll be able to answer most of what you'd want to be asking anyway. But there will be time for questions and answers at the end of the presentation. And feel free to just, raise your hand and we'll call on people in order when that happens. We are also available to answer questions. I can put the email address in the chat, but feel free to email our community affairs email if you have any other questions that you think of outside of this meeting. You just probably heard that this meeting will be recorded. We'll record this and post this for anybody that wasn't able to make it. And then also we will have, after question and answers, we're going to circulate a survey. So if you are a stakeholder here, if you live around the area, we'd like to hear from you.
It's about
We would love to hear from you with the survey, whether you live in the area or not, what your needs are, what your uses are for the Harlem River. So we can pass that around. Feel free to pass that out to other people in the neighborhood that might share some useful insight as well as we complete this UAA. So without further ado, I think I'm going to kick it over now to Keith Mahoney. Keith, if you're ready, I think you could get started unless I forgot anything.
I'm not getting started right now.
Oh, perfect. Thanks, Keith.
So the agenda is introduction. So Angela's going to give a brief introduction. I'll be taking most of the presentation. We'll go over what is a water quality designation. We're going to have an overview of the New York City Combined Sewer Overflow Program, as well as the harbor water quality. We're going to go over the DEP, what a use attainability analysis is, and the details of a use attainability analysis. I'm sure a term a lot of people haven't heard before, so we'll give you more details on that, and we typically call it a UAA for short. We'll then get into what DEP is proposing for a UAA and the reclassification of the Harlem River. And then, as Tara said, we'll do questions and answers, and there'll be a survey poll that'll be sent out afterwards. So the first one's really introduction. We covered some of these things already. And again, Angela, if you want to cover this, I can handle it too if you want me to.
I'll greet everyone by saying thank you so much, everyone, for being with us here tonight. My name is Angela Licata. I'm a deputy commissioner with the Department of Environmental Protection. Been here for over 30 years. It's been really a pleasure to see that our water bodies are responding to the very large levels of investment that we've been making in cleaning them. We know we have a long way to go still. We're not resting on our laurels here, but we do want to make sure that we spend our money wisely, that we get a return on our investment. The Harlem River is a very important and critical water body for us, and it is the first one we gave a priority status in terms of turning our attention to it first in this rulemaking process that we're participating in with the New York State DEC to determine what is the Harlem River's highest attainable use? What is it best suited for in terms of recreation and other activities that one would do within the water body? It certainly has a very key perspective in the community in terms of its amenity for shoreline access and viewing, and just as a very prominent feature for the Bronx. So we want to acknowledge all of that as well. And we will be covering a lot of material. So as Tara indicated, we would love to get some questions and answers going too, so that this becomes more interactive towards at the end of the program tonight. And just Keith, if you would just turn to the next slide. For those of you that don't know a little bit about DEP, we are one of the largest municipal run water and wastewater agencies. We are among the most elite group of water suppliers in terms of the quality of our drinking water. We serve over 1 billion gallons of water each and every day. We have a vast watershed, which is responsible for that wonderful water quality that we have access to. It is a 2,000 square mile watershed that is protected by the DEP. From the wastewater management perspective, we treat about 1.4 billion gallons of dry weather flow, sanitary flow, each and every day. We operate 14 wastewater resource recovery facilities in order to do that, 96 pumping stations to water from low-level areas to get into the distribution system for treatment. And for some of you that don't know, and I had the pleasure of supervising for a very long period of time, we also are the city agency responsible for regulating the air and the noise and hazardous waste components of the city, including asbestos. Okay, so now back to our featured performance on the Harlem River.
Hey, thank you, Angela.
You're welcome. Take it away, Keith.
Thanks. So the next section gets into what is a water quality designation. So in October 2023, DC updated some of their water quality criteria. Mainly, they adopted a new secondary contact bacteria indicator organism. They're using Enterococcus, which was previously used for primary contact. They've now adopted it for secondary contact. And this was based on previous work done by the EPA, the Beach Act, which had epidemiological studies where they linked different bacterial levels to human illnesses and things like that to establish water quality criteria. First, it was based on fecal coliform. Then they use Enterococcus, which is a better indicator organism. It's more associated with mammals and more it's in the human intestine. So it in itself, it's not dangerous, but it's an indicator that maybe viruses, parasites, and something else in the water. So those studies. So that set up kind of how they determine what the allowable levels are in the receiving waters. And then it was also combined with ingestion rates. So the secondary contact, DEC based it on ingestion rates associated with kayaking. So that's how these bacterial limits were developed for primary and secondary contact. As part of this updated water quality criteria, DC also adopted for CSO impacted water bodies and for primary contact water bodies, a wet weather limited use designation. So this would allow, it would acknowledge that after wet weather events, especially extreme wet weather events, the waters may be impaired for a little bit. So that's a new criteria that we're incorporating into this analysis. And lastly, what these UAAs are, they're really intended for water bodies that aren't projected to attain primary contact, primarily the bacterial criteria. That's really meant for swimming and things like that. So for water bodies that we're not projecting to fully attain primary contact, we'll need to develop and submit UAAs. So the table below kind of shows the list of water bodies and the DC segments that we're submitting UAAs for. So the first one's Harlem River, and the UAA was supposed to have that into the DC by the end of March 2025. And right now, the other ones, we don't have official dates yet, but we're looking to the East River next, followed by Newtown Creek, followed by multiple tribs to the East River and the Western Long Island Sound, followed by tribs of Jamaica Bay, along with Coney Island Creek. And lastly, we were going to do the Staten Island, the Kills, and some tributaries to Staten Island. Right now, the existing water quality classifications, you have Class I, that's secondary contact. That's for fishing and for secondary contact uses such as kayaking. You then have primary contact classifications that are Class SA, SB, and SC. SA's primary contact and is for shell fishing. Class SB and SC are both for fishing, secondary, and primary contact activities, even though SC acknowledges there may be other things that prevent primary contact activities. And lastly, there's Class SD, which was originally just fish survival, and this is a classification DC is looking to totally eliminate. And some of the current SD water bodies are ones like Gowanus Canal, Newtown Creek, the Arthur Kill, but like in some other tributaries. But DC will be eliminating that classification and upgrading into either a Class I or a Class SB, SC. Currently, the Harlem River is a Class I water body, so it's to support secondary contacts such as boating and fishing, but not swimming. The map to the right kind of just shows all the classifications currently, and New Jersey has slightly different classifications. So in shared water bodies, that's just as an FYI, we show how New York City and New Jersey, what their classifications are. So what does it mean for a water body to be designated for primary contact? Again, as I mentioned, the water quality criteria shall be suitable for primary contact activities such as swimming. And as I mentioned, the one we're really focusing on is the bacterial indicator organisms, both fecal coliform and entero. As I said, fecal is a much longer, we use fecal for a long time. Entero, we started sampling more in 2003, but entero is usually a better indicator of human contamination. And as I said, they're indicator organisms, so they're really, by themselves, they're not harmful, but they could be indicators that there's viruses, pathogens, or dangerous bacteria in the receiving waters. The Department of Health uses these bacterial indicators in permitting bathing beaches. So they also, and they adopted the Intero for the bathing beaches, but they also consider other factors. They consider things like boat traffic and other hazards, a distance to a CSO outfall. I think it's 300 feet. A bathing beach has to be greater than 300 feet from a CSO outfall. They look at bottom materials, as slopes, means of egress, things like that. Water currents, the water current should be less than 3 feet per second. Lifeguards and other safety requirements. There's more requirements. This is just kind of a short list just to give you a kind of understanding what's the difference between supporting primary contact and what's needed to make it into a bathing beach. The next section gets into the overview of the CSO long-term control plan program and the harbor water quality. And again, some of these slides I put in, I know we have a very robust crowd. So some of these may be rudimentary. I included this with some people, and some of them may be too detailed with some, but just want to give everyone a little background of even simple, what is a combined sewer overflow? New York City was the first sewer was actually constructed in New York City in the 1660s that went down Broad Street. It was essentially an open trench that conveyed sanitary flow to the East River. It was really meant to protect human health for the neighborhoods around there. More modern sewer systems started being constructed after 1849 due to cholera outbreaks. And again, it operated similar. It just really took the sanitary waste out of these congested neighborhoods and sent into the receiving water. It wasn't until the 1890s where people started realizing that all this pollution going into receiving waters impacted water quality, impacted downstream bathing beaches. So in the 1890s, New York City began constructing its first wastewater treatment plant. And this was also done in conjunction with constructing a regulator device and an interceptor. So the regulator would essentially divert flow from the sewer into the interceptor, and the 100% of sanitary flow would then go to the treatment plant and a portion of the wet weather. Back in the early treatment plants were probably pretty rudimentary. It's pretty much like bar screens, remove floatables, settling, and then disinfection. And today they're much more advanced, where they have secondary treatment, and many of them have tertiary treatment for nitrogen removal. Currently, the New York City's sewer system is about 60% combined sewers, which means it conveys, again, both sanitary and storm flows. So what happens, again, during dry weather, you can see all the dry weather kind of hits the regulator, goes into the interceptor. But during wet weather, particularly more extreme events, these sewers really fill up and there's a huge flow. So a portion of this diluted sanitary stream is discharged as a combined sewer overflow, and the other portion goes to the treatment plant. On an annual basis, we typically get about a 65 to a 90% wet weather capture in our system, but again, the remaining flow goes into the receiving water, and that's kind of what we focus on in the CSO long-term control plan is how do we mitigate those CSOs to improve water quality. So for the CSO program, DEP submitted 11 long-term control plans. These evaluate a range of options to really select the most cost-effective alternative based on both bacterial reductions and improvements in water quality attainment. These LTCPs included 2.7 billion in baseline grade projects. So these were projects that were already in construction or in design prior to the submittal of the LTCPs. They committed to 3.5 billion in green infrastructure. Approximately 1.3 billion has been encumbered to date. And they proposed an additional 8.7 billion in new projects, and approximately 1.2 billion has been encumbered to date. The bottom graphs just kind of show the reductions. So with the baseline and the GI plus the LTCP program, we reduced approximately 9 billion gallons of CSO from going into the receiving waters at a cost of about $15 billion. For the Harlem River, it was part of the citywide long-term control plan. There were no additional gray CSO projects recommended. However, we are targeting 22 GI projects in the watershed, and this includes the daylighting of Tibbetts Brook, one of the largest GI projects in the country. It's currently in design, about 90% design. We have some phase 1 work going on to remove some invasive species from the lake, and I think next year we'll be installing a living shoreline there. It's about a $133 million project. When it's constructed, to remove about 4 to 5 gallons of dry weather flow. This flow currently goes to the Wards Island treatment plant. So 4 to 5 million gallons of flow will be coming out of the sewer system, freeing up wastewater treatment capacity. And during wet weather, we're projecting it should reduce CSOs by about 220 million gallons per year and prevent that from going into the Harlem River. So this next one just kind of shows what Angela brought up, just kind of historical improvements in water quality, as well as all the investments made to date. So from 73 to 2011, that's after the Clean Water Act, there was about $40 billion spent to upgrade a number of wastewater resource recovery facilities, formerly known as wastewater treatment plants, as well as constructing 2 new wastewater recovery facility plants. From 99 to 2022, about 1.2 billion went in to upgrading 8 of the plants for biological nitrogen removal. 1995 to 2024, we spent about $5 billion on those baseline CSO gray projects I talked about, as well as some of those GI projects. And from 2025 to 2050, we're looking to spend an additional 7.4 billion in CSO controls. So this next one really gets into what our investments got us to date, particularly in the Harlem River. Again, overall projected water quality is relatively good in the Harlem River. We meet the fecal coliform monthly geomean of 200 colony forming units per 100 milliliters. This is applied for all water bodies, including primary contact. And we also meet the Enterococcus 30-day geometric mean of both 35, which is primary contact, and 72, which is secondary contact. However, the projected water quality is not able to fully attain the 30-day statistical threshold value. It's a 90th percentile value. It's typically hard to meet in a lot of water bodies. It's the most stringent of the criteria. However, when you look at it, we are fairly good. When you look at the recreation season 30-day with the STV, we're looking about 57 to 85% attainment. And we're working with the DEC and EPA, we kind of identify these water bodies as potentially viable to looking at some sort of that wet weather impairment designation. So we targeted water bodies at high levels of attainment and maybe didn't fully meet STV as maybe viable candidates that if we had wet weather limited designation that we can fully attain that we can attain the water quality standards. Again, allowing for wet weather excursions. And we'll provide a little more detail on that later on. Okay, so the next section gets into the DEP, the use attainability analysis. What is the use attainability analysis and kind of factors that are used in the use attainability analysis? So again, DEP is using this UAA for the Harlem River. It was kind of follow up from the 1972 Clean Water Act that had a goal of all waters supporting primary contact. But there was follow-up documents and all. And the UAA, what this is a scientific evaluation of factors affecting the ability of the water body to attain its designated use. It kind of acknowledges that even though a goal is primary contact, there are factors that may preclude fully attaining primary contact. And these factors are to the right. You have naturally occurring pollutant concentrations. You have intermittent low flow conditions. Factor 3, you have human caused conditions that can't be remedied or may cause more environmental damage. Factor 4 is dams, diversion, other types. It's really hydrologic modifications to a stream. You have physical conditions related to natural features of the water body. And factor 6, the last one, is substantial and widespread economic and social impact. So the 3 that we focused on that we thought were applicable for Harlem River were factor 3, human caused conditions, factor 4, the hydrologic modifications, and factor 6, the substantial and widespread economic and social impacts. Again, as I mentioned, the factor 3, the man-made conditions, the watershed is very urbanized and populated, bulkheaded along this, highly bulkheaded and riprap along the either side of the Harlem River. We had a lot of historic alterations over the century that really impacted flows in the Harlem River. And the last one, the economic impact, and we'll provide more details on this. And this really brings in that 15 billion of committed money to the CSO program, as well as maintaining, as Angela mentioned, for this one, we don't look at drinking water, but the wastewater program, the sewer construction, all those other projects that we need to keep running.
Hey, Keith.
Yes.
Hey, I might have missed it, but I just want to be sure everybody understands that these six factors are defined by the US EPA in this analysis.
Oh, okay. Yes. Okay. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, so this is just getting some of the characteristics. Again, this is linked more to factor 3, kind of the adjacent land use and water currents, just kind of along the riparian area, the quarter mile from the shoreline. It's about 43% residential, 31% parks, and 19% manufacturing. Some of the other things, as I said, velocities within Harlem River, typically 3 to 6 feet per second. There's some really strong currents in there, and limited waterfront access, particularly like a lot of elevation differences with the bulkhead and all, not really accessible to the water body. Some other key characteristics. Again, as I mentioned, large bulkheaded portions along the river. We have the railway running along the shoreline. Some of the access points include parks, walkways, boat launches, and fishing locations, again, limited. And CSOs are really distributed all along the Harlem River, both on the Manhattan and the Bronx side. So that's just, again, there's more detail in the UAA document itself, but this is kind of some of the considerations we gave to factor 3. In terms of factor 4, this is really what I was talking about, the hydrologic modifications. So over the century, there's a significant modifications made. You had a lot of modifications made up at the Spuden Dival. I always pronounce that wrong. But
Spighten.
I'm sorry, Spiden Dival, the spouting devil. Yes. So there was altercations there. A lot of the brooks were buried. Again, as I mentioned, a lot of this whole channel was this water body was channelized really for boat traffic and things like that. Down when you get down on the other side, down near Hell's Gate, they had 3 separate islands that provided some circulation. These 3 islands were combined into one island with fill, which also really cut off a lot of the circulation and had hydrologic impact on this water body. The last one again to factor 6. So I'll give a little details on this. So this one, again, I show 2 different pie charts here. One, I show the entire DP budget. We typically do 10-year plans. Our latest 10-year plan's over $33 billion. So what we did with that 10-year plan, we projected it out 25 years to kind of match with our CSO investments and the GI that we're looking to kind of invest in over the next 25 years. So as we project that out, it's a total budget of about $90.6 billion for the entire DP program. When we take out the drinking water, because part of EPA's guidance for the financial capability assessment is that we just use the wastewater and the sewer and drainage spending. So that's the pie chart on the right, and that comes down to that 57.9. So this 48.2 billion is really a lot of investments for all the sewer build out, as well as wastewater treatment plant upgrades. The 7.5 I talked about earlier. We have 7.5 billion in the future plan that needs to be committed to CSO gray projects, and another about 2.2 billion to complete the green infrastructure projects. So we look at that as kind of our baseline spending. Then we looked at what it would take if we wanted to bring this water body to be able to support primary contact, what level of CSO reduction would we need? So we ran different modeling scenarios and water quality models, and it showed that we would need a 75% or greater CSO control to attain the primary contact criteria for that, the SDV I showed earlier of less than or equal to 130. And so we looked at that and we get some of the animations going. So we kind of looked at what a tunnel may look like and where we would have to pick up flow and things like that. We really focused on the larger CSO outfalls, trying to make it as cost effective as possible. But it ends up being a 7-mile long tunnel we would need to hit some of those large CSO outfalls. We're looking at about 150 feet deep, a 30-foot diameter tunnel, and the total storage we would need is about 188 million gallons. And just based on that storage too is, oh, I'm sorry, that we would need a dedicated wet weather treatment system to kind of handle that. So when we looked at all those things, our preliminary cost estimate was between 6 to 13 billion. I mean, these are level 5 estimates. Right now we're around 9 billion. We have an independent sub-consultant kind of refining the cost estimates who's familiar with tunnel work. They're actually working on the Newtown Creek Tunnel right now. So we're looking to update some of those costs as well as looking at our most recent capital plan. But again, if we were to construct these tunnels, extremely challenging, a lot of land acquisitions, a ton of easements. You need all these underground easements, so it really adds up quickly. The components, again, you need a dewatering pump station, which we envision would be near the Ward Island treatment plant, where we'd be constructing a wet weather treatment facility. That dewatering, that would also be the launch shaft where the tunneling would begin from. And then we were looking at then 9 recovery shafts near those large CSO alpha. So we have 9 drop shafts, 1 launch shaft. We would need significant diversion structures to divert the flow away from the outfall into the tunnel. And again, the sewers to get it to the drop shaft, the intercepting sewers. We may have potential need to upsize the outfall structures due to transients associated with tunnels that result in geysers. And so that becomes difficult. We're trying to get it under a lot of these railroad tracks and things like that. Again, community impact, we require a lot of complete or partial street closures during the construction, significant truck traffic for the tunneling muck to remove all that tunneling debris. Again, potential condemnation of properties. And again, what we looked at as part of financial capability assessment, we don't look at the water rates directly, but we use the EPA guidance I'll go over next, because it's kind of a pseudo impact to the rates.
Hey, Keith,
Yes.
I would just add that the truck impacts would, continue in perpetuity for servicing the various
Oh, okay.
facilities.
Yes, those.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd have 9 drop shafts. You would have different grit and rock removal chambers that you'd have to maintain and remove.
Yeah, you'd have trucks coming on
Yeah.
a periodic basis to deal with screenings and that kind of thing. So that would go on forever.
So this next one, what I looked at again, so we're looking at the Harlem River first, but as I mentioned, we have 6 more of these we have to look at. So we really can't segment these projects when we look at the cost implications either. So we show right here, we show the baseline cost. This is kind of where we're at right now with our LTCP long-term control plan.
Section of the Bronx is a historical building. Yes, that was the bridge. It's significant history.
This next one, I show that additional 9 billion for the 75% Harlem River reduction. But you can see as we start looking at citywide, you can look at 74 to 105 billion. And again, all these estimates are going to keep refining in future UAAs, but it's definitely been in this range based on the experience we've seen so far with the Newtown Creek Tunnel and some of our costing for the Flushing Bay Tunnel. So I just wanted to make everyone kind of aware of what these costs look like. But when we did our financial capability assessment in the UAA, we looked primarily at the 75% reduction to see how that may impact, again, a pseudo for water rates, but how that may impact the affordability. So the methodology that the EPA has, and they kind of have 2 different ones. One is kind of that percentage of the median income. They also look at a degree of community rate pays. They look at low income too. It's another one, and economic impact indicators they looked at. So the median it's basically going over 2% of the median, which when we looked at $9 billion, additional $9 billion brought us slightly over that 2%. If we looked at similar reductions throughout the city, it's well over that medium income. And we also looked at the lower quintiles and things like that. And that's kind of part of this expanded economic impact matrix. And they kind of have three different things. You can either land in the impact on clear, mid-range impact, or substantial impact. So the existing planned investments have us at the mid-range impact. When we look at the $9 billion tunnel, it puts us into substantial impact using the expanded financial capability assessment. And again, that's just for that 75% capture, and any additional CSO captured in some of the other ward bodies like East River and things like that would bring us well above this substantial impact. So that was all factored into this use attainability analysis. So the next section is kind of the DEP's proposed UAA and reclassification for the Harlem River. So we mentioned the three factors we relied on. Factor 3, constructing the CSO storage tunnel may not be feasible and would cause more environmental damage. Also, again, factor 4, restoring the Harlem River to its natural hydrologic condition is not viable due to the intense urbanization. And mainly the factor 6 is probably what we're mainly relying on. We want to include all the factors, but that DP customers would face both substantial and widespread economic and social impacts with additional CSO controls beyond the 15 billion that's part of the current CSO program. So again, these are the water body classifications. The current one is Class I. The new one that DC has is a Class SB with wet weather restrictions, and there's Class SB, which is full primary contact. So we're looking at this Class SB wet weather as so we're looking to upgrade it from Class I to a Class SB with some wet weather restrictions. And just kind of shown right here. And like I said, it would support primary contact, but again, there would be some excursions after wet weather events. And the next part of the analysis is really defining these wet weather events. So we had 10 years of water quality modeling data, as well as actual data we used to calibrate the models and from different sampling, both NGOs as well as the citywide harbor survey monitoring. But again, this is showing kind of the modeling. So again, after a wet weather event, as you'd imagine, these bacterial levels spike, but then they drop down fairly quick. And we're trying to get it below that STV of 130. So this just kind of shows that time it takes, we call this time to recovery. So it spikes during the wet weather, drops afterwards. So this would be that excursion period. And same here. So after this large rain event of 0.8 inches, see it spikes, then it drops down. So when we talked to DC, we kind of said it looked like anything greater than 0.5 inches may result in an advisory. To keep it more simplistic, if it's less rain, we could probably do less time, but we tried to keep it at a 36-hour advisory following any rain event greater than 0.5 inches. And what this means is I took 10 years of precipitation data. So I looked at number of events that were between 0.5 to 1 inch, number of events from 1 to 3 inches, and number of events greater than 3 inches. So You see 79, 61, and 8, so 148 events total. And I simply applied the 36-hour advisories to see percent of time that a wet weather advisory would be in effect, and it ended up being about 12% of the recreation season. And as I mentioned earlier, the water body currently complies with the fecal coliform geometric mean, the monthly geometric mean, complies with the 30-day rolling average enterococcus geometric mean, but again, not with the STV value. But when you apply this and recalculate the STV, it also then complies with the STV value. So it's really meant, again, as a wet weather advisory after those extreme wet weather events, that the water body may not be safe for may not support primary contact recreation, but other times it would. And I know there was a lot in that presentation, so we're at the question and answer portion right now.
Can you go through the questions that were posed in the chat?
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't see those, but yes.
See
So,
those, and I wasn't sure, Angela, is there anything else you want to comment on or say before we go into questions and answers?
No, I think that this is a good segue.
Okay, perfect. So if you want, I'm happy to go through some of the questions that I'm seeing. Let's see. Chauncey, I think you had asked the two possible designations for the Harlem River, discussed thoroughly how each designation and how we would obtain each designation. Do we just want to give an overview of that again, just to make sure people are clear on that? Keith or Angela, any?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I was going
didn't
to try to
quite
go back to the slide, but
grasp the question, but okay.
Is this a situation, I think this is related to my confusion about this question. Is this a situation where you are proposing certain investments that would enable you to reclassify the river in a cleaner category? Or are you simply saying, we now think we meet this category, so we're proposing to reclassify it based on where we are right now?
this is meant to be post when the Tibbetts Brook project is done. But yeah, so we're looking to upgrade it based on the Tibbetts Brook project, upgraded from Class I to Class B WW.
And Joy, it actually did both things. So we took that first step to say, where would we be on that scale of water quality enhancements once the planned investments are done, which is our Tibbetts Brook project. And then we also asked ourselves, what would it take to get to the next level up? And that's when we started to look at the 75% reduction in the tunnel project.
So basically, you're saying after Tibbetts Brook is done, we should be in the SB with the water quality, with the rainfall restrictions already, and that the investments that it would take to get to a better category are too expensive and too difficult. Is that?
Yes, well done.
And I think that's a good segue. I know Joy and a couple of other people had funding questions. So some of the questions were how much of the funding for this would be federal? And then how if this is being charged through water rates, how much of that would be charged through water rates and why?
Yeah, so the short answer on the federal funding is we don't have any federal funding in the Tibbetts project. We are hopefully going to be getting some grants in the city of New York, but the status is really tentative at this point on overall funding from the federal government. And really the DEP has not seen significant federal investments in clean water projects since really the 1970s, since the inception of the Clean Water Act. The federal government helped the city build certain wastewater resource recovery facilities, as we call them today, but then the operation and maintenance and any upgrades and additional attention to more regulatory improvements have been left to the ratepayers. And so to the second part of your question, yes, the funding would be through water and wastewater rates. On the Tibbetts project, we do have a split funding with the Parks Department for certain elements that are parks and recreation related and would not be legitimate funding from the system or the utility, as we call ourselves sometimes.
Bob, did you have a question?
Thank you, everybody. So we've had obviously a lot of discussion about the use of the word upgrade. So I definitely want to talk about that and how you define this as an upgrade. It does feel like we are declaring victory and not changing anything. Okay. So on that score, I just want to make sure from our BCQ side that we have this very tough discussion again about green infrastructure and alternative analysis of CSO reduction. It feels like we were successful in reaching a investment. DEP really did find daylighting as the best, and it was also green infrastructure compliance, but the best CSO reduction. But I just wanted to tick off, and I'm sure my colleagues here are going to bring up other things. I just wanted to make sure that you've exhausted things like looking upstream, looking, because this is open waters, looking at Yonkers and their regulatory protections for the pollution plant, dealing with Westchester. As you know, 60% base flow reaches Van Cortlandt Park through Westchester, and that's all regulated by MS4. We really feel we could be doing much more if DEP was not in this alone. If there were intermunicipal agreements that really did manage holistically across the entire watershed that is above the city line, our stormwater. It does feel bad that we are reaching a point where we're giving up on stormwater, on wet weather outfall, and we're going to have this permanent exemption now. That we can't handle stormwater. And I do feel that we need to maintain that goal of handling stormwater on land in situ and not give up, because that's how a city maintains its resiliency. And there are lots of ways that other agencies, including, remember, there are 13 bridges over the damn Harlem River. What has state DOT done to manage wet weather? Okay. So we really stress, number one, learn from daylighting and natural features. But number two, think outside your toolbox of just your own budget and your own infrastructure, your own property, your sewer lines, like you did with daylighting, and start thinking interagency and intermunicipal. I also want to say, when you're calling the Harlem River, saying that this is a user attainability based on present use, that you really have to, Chauncey and the Harlem River Working Group have envisioned a shoreline access. Okay. And people have given their lives for this 20 years. We cannot let a water designation preclude that. And you understand what I'm saying, that if it's not there now, we're going to change the water quality to suit the attainability and the features. And therefore, the Harlem River community will never know what it's like to get in the water, have regular boating, have primary and secondary. It just feels like it will be a chilling effect on what a generation has tried to create. And I really just defer to the Harlem River community on this because this is their river and they have imagined something that the city has not to this point.
Thank you, Bob. I'm gonna go over to Laura. I know she had her hand raised.
Tara, do you want me to just address a few of those points?
If you'd like, sure, sure.
Yeah, I mean, there weren't really questions, but there were a lot of statements, and I think that they were important statements. I just didn't want them to go completely unaddressed. So, Bob, in terms of your principles around watershed planning, I believe that that is very important. I think that we can do more work, intergovernmental work around, how we can incentivize or encourage Westchester to do some more source control so that they're not sending some of these flows and loads downstream. I do think that that is very important. And I do think your call for more intergovernmental action is correct and appropriate. The point about, picking a standard now or a best use classification for a water body, one of the best parts of the Clean Water Act is that it's very aspirational. It does not give up on water bodies. It took rivers that were, on fire, like in Cleveland, or Cincinnati. I forget exactly what city the river was running through at the time, but essentially, and creates an opportunity for that to be perpetually reviewed and upgraded as financing becomes available, as new strategies, techniques become available. So we will not be giving up on the Harlem River as a result of this. We feel like we are, taking a moment in time in which we're looking to make the improvements with the Tibbetts Brook project, and we want to build off of that. Right. So we want to be looking forward at what is next and what kinds of investments are cost effective. So I don't think that we want to feel as though we're giving up on this river. One thing about New York City, so many water bodies and there's so many priorities. And so we're constantly looking at where are the cost effective benefits. And we're spreading those around a very large city. So I just wanted to say that as well, and not to get into a debate about it, but mostly that I agree with you, but I also don't want you to think that we would be standing still in time, because the Clean Water Act will have us reassessing and re-reviewing as we go down the road what is next, what is possible into the future. So we'll be constantly measuring and constantly evaluating. All right, Tara, next question.
Laura, go ahead.
Thank you for this presentation. I'm concerned about the huge increase in new development along the Harlem River. Particularly now we have City of Yes, there'll be more development. And with this brings more toilets and more flushing and, impacts on the environment. So considering the heavy combined sewer overflow issues and inadequate infrastructure, how will all this impact the Harlem River? And it seems that DEP always signs off on these projects. And is there a limit at which you will say, no, we won't sign off on more of these projects because of the sensitive environment?
Yeah, those are excellent points, and we have had to address those. Clearly, the city is going to have to provide additional affordable housing. We know that growth is essential for the vitality of the city, but it must be monitored and it must be thought through in a very sort of anticipated way. So one of the things, Laura, that we're doing, and we do have a wide range of tools that we utilize as we monitor flows and look at the demographics throughout the city. We'll be watching where the pressure from City of Yes comes in. At the same time, as you know, we have a new, what we call the Unified Stormwater Rule, where for any new development in the city, and it wouldn't be necessarily just for the accessory dwelling units that are part of the city of yes, but any substantial new development that's 20,000 square feet or greater has to basically manage all their stormwater on site. And what we're starting to see as part of that program, which I think we have over 300 applications just this year in that program, is that is going to start to offset some of the flows that we're seeing in the sewer system. So it's techniques like that that will allow us to both grow and also limit the impacts and pressures on the sewer system and the receiving water bodies.
Thank you. And good luck with that, with getting the developers to follow it. Thank you.
It's not easy.
Thank you, Laura. Next, let's go to Chauncey. If you are, see if I can unmute you.
Yes.
There you go.
Good evening, all. Sorry, I'm in my board meeting for my cooperative in the Highbridge neighborhood of the Bronx, so I had to step out. I think the concern that I have about this proposal, I think that many of us have, is that there's been, continued advocacy for additional recreational boating and other activities along the Harlem River. And that the Harlem River still has, the most CSOs of any body of water in the city. We would like to have these situations addressed. And, I think moving towards additional cleanup of the CSOs is essential, not only the CSOs, but many of the bridges, including the expressway, the Alexander Hamilton Bridge, dumps trash right into the river during storm events because the scalpers are, right over the water. So, it's in addition to the overflow, from the sewer, it's also the overflow from the highway. And, we are, as, Laura was sharing, we are seeing more and more development along the Harlem River that is increasing the load on our, sewer system and, the concerns that we have around that. So I would advocate that we push for the higher designation and that we work to address some of the, long-standing CSO issues and, additional green infrastructure projects should be considered along the Harlem River, including, the greenway that we're proposing being seen as, a green infrastructure project where, we can use that as sort of a containment system for some of the overflow that happens. The waterfront right now, several times I contact because the CSO right next to the High Bridge, just north of the High Bridge, that explodes, every time there's a heavy rain event because it's clearly hasn't been cleaned or it's not, and so it spews trash and debris and sewage onto what will be the future Harlem River Greenway path and the future Bridge Park South. So I think addressing these issues so that we're not seeing, our parks and community, having these issues should be a major priority for our community. And, there's been plans in the River Tucumante state park plan to build a boathouse. There's been multiple plans and funding proposals for a boathouse on the Harlem River side, and we are currently increasing we have Row New York building a new boathouse on the Manhattan side of the Harlem River. So there is use, and there's going to be continued and expanded use, including, as I put in the chat, one of our private developers, Dynamic Star, is planning on building boat docks and hopefully along with our council members advocating for ferry stops along the Harlem River. So there's, I think there's going to be a growing use of the waterfront, and we really would like to see prioritize the river being clean and usable, swimmable, fishable, potable.
Thank you, Chauncey. Appreciate that. Let me go. Joy, I know you have your hand up. If you wouldn't mind, I'll go to someone else who we haven't heard from yet, and then I'll circle back with you. I see Eva. Do you want to go next?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. I think this is just adding to the conversation and the points that Chauncey was making and others have made, and I'm sure Joy will make as well. We see this constant engagement with making the water accessible and clean. Waterfront development has sort of embraced this idea of water access. There's a huge push to complete the greenway around the entirety of Manhattan. Yet access to the water that is safe and accessible, and also maintaining the waterways as safe and accessible places for recreation is completely overlooked in these conversations. Building boathouses, building docks, if you can't access them safely, if there's no policing of boat traffic, if there's no creation of areas for on-water recreation that does not compete with commercial and other forms of boating, these designations feel a little superficial. So I'm curious if there's any part of these projects that also looks at the shoreline as part of the water quality, in terms of these designations specifically speaking to swimmable, fishable, paddleable waters.
I don't, Keith, do you want to take that one? Or, I mean, you bring up a great point, because there's obviously two separate things that are happening. There's the classification and designation, and then there's also other components that we look at in terms of safety, in terms of what recreation we can use. So, that is a really good point that you're bringing up. And I don't know, Keith, I'm not well versed in the other
No,
permit.
I know it gets very
But
complicated, all that stuff again, because again, we're looking at water quality to support these different designation uses, but like you said, that's just a piece of it. The other piece is actually building the accessibility, all these other things, DOH permitting bathing beaches, and so again, this isn't meant to do everything. It's just a part of the process. So I understand the question, I'm just not sure how to address it. Like when we have projects and all, we typically try to have some sort of amenity for DP project. But yeah, this just involves a lot of different city agencies, private entities, and again, just providing that
yeah,
access to
and
the
this is
water
the first
body.
step in that. So I think those considerations would be taken should we move forward, depending on how it's designated.
Yeah, and I guess this is more of a general comment. Just I know Angela addressed it too, but again, we're not saying we're done with CSOs or we're done with MS4 right now. We're going to continue all the projects as we do any sewer upgrades, especially for redevelopment. We're going to look for opportunities to improve it to further reduce CSO. We're going to look at opportunities where we maybe can have both flood mitigation, CSO control as a hybrid project. So citywide, we're going to continue to focus on reducing CSO and reducing stormwater impacts.
Do you see that as being done in cooperation, in tandem with other waterfront development projects to support recreational uses that you envision?
That's what I'm envisioning. Like it again, this is just a piece of it. It's
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I'm thinking about as you're speaking to that point is whether or not through city planning, like that's where I'm uncertain there as they do waterfront development, they often build in those types of waterfront access requirements, and additional uses on the waterfront that would allow for additional public access. So that's where I would normally think of directing those types of comments.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that perspective. Karen, do you want to go next?
Yeah, city planning, Angela, great agency, but they really don't do anything. They're not gonna do anything to help. They put 40-foot paths along the water that are, have, I mean, you should see it. You would just be horrified. First of all, I'd like to say that we need more time. March, is that what you said, Keith? That's not enough time.
Yes.
We need time to look at this. We need time to put together, this was like a 2-week thing. Look, have a meeting, come to it. It's in the middle of everybody else doing like 1,700 different things. I can't tell you how much stuff is going on. We need at least 3 months. We need to talk to the people in the community, and we need to go over this document that you have. There's a lot of problems in it. And I don't think I just want to push you a little bit further. I don't think you're doing enough. It's not you, it's the city of New York. I know what DEP has been doing, and I know that there are things that you just can't do. And so, the stuff with Westchester, that has to be taken care of. The stuff with the bridges, there's no excuse for that. That has to be taken care of. Those bridges are polluting the water, and they're not even counted. So how are you ever going to get this clean if you can't take care of each of your points of pollution? Right? And then the scoop on the poop, we heard about what happens in 056 and 060, which are the two biggest outfalls, Highbridge and Fordham Landing. And we need to do stuff with that. And we've been advocating for a green infrastructure greenway that's connected also to the waterfront. And I know, I know it's very built up. I know that it's riprap. That doesn't mean you can't do things in the water along the edge for the living shoreline that will make it more safe and productive. And then finally, we're only talking about CSO, but if you want to get the water clean, there's other things you can look at, and the quantity counts. And if we can cut down the quantity with that green infrastructure and the along the whole edge of the Harlem River and the Bronx part, I would love it to happen in Manhattan, but I'm not advocating for them. They're not always sitting at the table with us. There's no reason why a greenway has to be more concrete, more impervious surfaces. In terms of the amount of development that is already in existence since the last time Keith came to speak to BCQ, which I think was like in 2008, I'm not sure, that the difference is unbelievable. All these buildings are up, all of them are adding to the load of both the runoff, because there's no trees, there's no grass, there's nothing but concrete and a big building. And I thought also that those buildings along the Harlem River, south of 161st Street, I thought they all had to get DEC permits to discharge into the river. So they're discharging now. So now we have all these things going on that you can't control without everybody else coming and sitting in the table with you. And so how can we help you take care of those things? I've been saying for years, we need the standard to be increased. We cannot be just capturing and designing things for 1.5 inches. We need to go the extra, level. And I think green infrastructure is a great way to do it, as long as it goes infiltrating into the soil, not anything that has. I saw what you guys were doing in Queens. I know that you had to do that for the right of way with all the concrete that gets poured around, but I'm thinking of putting plants in with trees and stuff like that. To me, that's what I consider to be green infrastructure. And so we have to get a little bit more into that and not into the concrete stuff. It would be cost less. You could do more, and we need more. And I did find a couple of stories and research from USGS concerning bedrock, and that's why we need more time, so we can propose the changes that we think are necessary. The bedrock is not a problem with infiltration. It's you have to make sure it's the right bedrock and that there's little cracks in it and stuff. That's how we got water into all of our streams, from the bedrock, and I mean, I remember going to a conference up in the watershed, and USGS was there drawing these little marks, and that's where it said the crack was going, and the water was going down from the road, and it was the forest actually, and it was going down, and it went into the base flow. That's how it happened. We have buildings that go down hundreds of feet. We can do a lot of things here. And then I guess, yeah, we need more time, and we need, and I guess I didn't realize that the wet water designation means that it's not just when it's raining, it's 36 hours after.
Yes.
That's a problem. I mean, that's a problem because, there's people that are in boats in the river. I mean, I know it didn't sound like that from your report. I didn't finish the whole report, but I think everybody should have a copy of the report, and that we should all be able to meet together. I mean, I'm not saying that we have to have any more meetings. I'm done with the meetings. We have a lot of meetings, but we may have questions, and we need to have a back and forth, and people need time to read it and understand it. It's complicated, very complicated, as you know. Thank you.
Angela and Keith, sorry, I should know this, but if anybody does want to review this document, can you let me know where we would host this or when that would be available for them to review, if at all?
You can definitely I put it on the website. Yeah. What's the easiest place for us to post it for access?
We can put that on the website for folks. And when would we be able to do that? After submission, before?
You should have it, we should have it before you submit it. There's things that have to be corrected. I mean, I can do some things, but it's going to take a while.
Have this document?
No, not everybody has. I was afraid to give it out. I didn't know who had it. I didn't know, if we were supposed to, but we should be looking at that we should be reading the document.
It's a document and you have it.
I have the document. I can share with you, Joy.
We made a couple of requests for more time. We hope you take that back and can think about that, asking for an extension to file. There's a lot of moving parts.
We'll be happy
here.
to write to the DEC and tell them to.
Yes, we're good advocates, as you know.
Okay. Joy, did you have another question?
Yeah, I have two questions. One is kind of broad and philosophical, and the other one is very specific. I will start with the broad one. You talked about using cost effectiveness as criteria for choosing among the different proposals for different kinds of infrastructure across the city. Very logical. However, there are other criteria that might also be relevant, and I'm wondering if cost effectiveness is the only one you use. Second possible criterion that's relevant, putting your money to benefit the communities that have the most challenges, that are facing the most challenges, which may not be the most cost effective, but it's a way of saying, if we do everything for the most cost effective, we mean do everything for the rich people and not for the people who live in neighborhoods that are badly served, which includes everybody on the Harlem River because they cannot get to the river. So a third criterion, which is maybe the same one, is putting your money where the discharge problems are the worst. So if the Harlem River has the most CSOs, then that's where you put your money to deal with CSOs, not where treating CSOs is most cost effective, because that will just make the pretty good places better instead of making the really bad places pretty good. So that's my first comment, and it's sort of a question, are you using other criteria? Because the only one you mentioned is cost effectiveness. And I certainly understand the logic for cost effectiveness. You know, I work on development projects, and the notion of putting the money where you can do the most good certainly makes sense, but is not always the best argument. Sometimes you have to serve the people who most need to be served, even though it's not cost effective. My second question is very specific technical one. Do you guys have a way of sending alerts to let people know, people who sign up to receive alerts that said, this sewer outlet had an overflow starting at this time and ending at that time, so that we know when the water is likely to be over. I'm a rower. We're out on the Harlem River all the time between April and November. We do fall in the water sometimes, especially thanks to inconsiderate other traffic on the Harlem River, not because we're inept rowers, but we get waked by large boats. And it would be useful to us to know, not because somebody did a model and said, oh, it rained 0.7 of an inch over here, so maybe that's dirty, but these CSOs had overflows. Do you have real-time trackers in the outfalls that you get a signal when the water is going into the river instead of going back to the sewage treatment plant, so that you know in real time and you can alert people who sign up for alerts?
So there was a lot of questions in question number 2, and I was thinking we'd take that one first. So we do the water body alert. So it is for the whole reach of the water body, and you sign up through the New York alerts, or what they call NY alerts. We're trying to work on post-processing information that can be correlated with rainfall to eventually get to an outfall-based alert system. We don't have real-time telemetry yet that has been super effective, but we are learning, in the state of play, or the state of the technology is moving really fast. And so we are about to put in 5,000 or so sensors into the sewer system to get a better sense of what those flows look like. Frankly, to really look at the flows and conditions to better understand flooding and related infrastructure capacity to flood prone locations, because that's what we really hear the most about at DEP. You know, with the concern from the average resident is, how can you protect us from hazardous driving conditions and property damages? So but we do have that technology that I think is going to be able to expand in use. We have also some additional telemetry that, I don't know, Keith, if you want to speak to anything, but it's called Smart Sewers. We're working on that, where they install various instruments on the manhole cap and cover, where that can do some sewer reading. So we're getting there, as trying to keep pace with the technology as it emerges on that front. So the short answer is, right now it's water body advisories. We'd like to get to an outfall-based system. We are experimenting, and finally got some really significant, sufficient funding to really suss out and assess some of these latest technologies that can give us real-time measurements. Keith's shop, he's the director of water quality analysis for DEP. They're constantly post-processing data, looking at rainfall indicators and trying to get a better understanding of how that correlates with CSO volumes. And that's how we do a lot of the water quality modeling that you see that we've developed for the programs. And I forgot the first question.
The first question has to do with your criteria for deciding where to invest. And
Okay. So we look at various criteria, because we have looked at this by water body to better understand, what do the investments do to change the water quality signal? Does it, if we invested $1 billion, if we invested 7 billion, you saw the number was like 9 billion here, what does that get us? Does it bring us to the next level of use within the water body? Or do we essentially improve the bacterial conditions in that water body for a longer period of time? Both are important, but they're different. So we want to be able to recover. Karen, you mentioned 36 hours. You know, if we made certain investments, we would be able to recover from the wet weather excursions more quickly. And that is something that is worth reviewing. But again, when it comes to investments like in green infrastructure, we've done most of those in environmental justice or socioeconomically disadvantaged communities. When we've looked at our cloudburst projects and making certain investments, we've looked at the social vulnerability indexes. So we do often look beyond the cost benefit analysis when we think about the programs. and making investments. And of course, overall, the ratepayers are paying, it's a regressive tax. They're paying not according to income, they're paying according to water use. And that is what the state of New York requires. So there I'm going to say, you know, we probably have a system that is not supporting low-income communities the way it needs to be.
You're required to pay for this only from water and sewer rates? That's crazy. That means you can never afford to help poor people because I mean, it's presumably.
Well, we're spending $15 billion on CSOs, right? I mean, it's over a long period of time, but that's a lot of money. And again, you know, New York City is so incredibly blessed by the waterfront, 520 something miles, but it's also a vast waterfront. Yeah, and we don't want to defend CSOs. We're out of the business of defending CSOs. We want to abate CSOs. We're just trying to figure out how much, where, and when.
Mm-hmm.
The only questions
phase
left.
it in over time. Yeah. Like Angela said, like the LTSPs was a lot with the water quality, but yeah, a lot of our newer analysis, we're trying to do this social justice, we're looking flood prone, we're trying to link everything to really leverage our investments and look for opportunities. And the other thing we're struggling with now is just the treatment plants, particularly North River. We talked about that was almost built all on federal funding. That was 40 years ago. It's in dire need of many upgrades, costing billions of dollars at that treatment plant without any additional federal funding.
So it sounds like you're using different measures of effectiveness, but all of your measures are cost effectiveness. They're not based on income level need. Or
We're looking at that now. The LTSPs, when we developed them, it was mainly really that cost effectiveness and trying to.
Yeah. Thanks.
And like Angela said, where we can move the needle the most.
So I know we're almost at time where we went over. So I think what we can do is I will send you guys a follow-up email to everybody who joined tonight. Please let me know if you have any other comments or or you have any other questions. I put the email address in the chat that I check. I'll get those and catalog them, and I'll try to answer you back as best we can. And then I'll send out a link with this presentation and more information on where you can view the UAA. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to send it in through the community affairs email. We will also, and I don't know if Trent or anybody put it in the chat, but we had a survey as well. Really super quick survey. It's in both English and Spanish. If anybody wants to fill it out from this group, great. If you want to pass it along to other people in your neighborhoods in Manhattan and the Bronx, feel free. We'd love to hear different perspectives. That's exactly what we had this meeting for. We had some great insight and perspectives tonight. So definitely appreciate all of you joining. And you guys all know where to find me, most of you, so feel free to reach out if you have any other questions for me. And I will be in touch soon, probably not tomorrow, but by the end of the week, I'll be in touch.
Keith, just wanted to say, I just asked you a question directly.
Oh yeah, I was just going to respond to that. There's yeah, the water quality data. No, we have the same problem. We talk to other people out trying to. We're manually compiling all that water quality data, but there's nothing. Like no publicly available sites where you kind of put together all the data DEP and the NGOs collect in the sites.
Okay, sorry, nobody else saw that question because I only sent it.
Okay.
Relevant to this meeting. Thanks for answering that.
But yeah, you can follow up with the email too.
Which email?
If you want to email me at work or something.
Is your email address around somewhere? You want to put it in the chat?
Feel free to, you can email the community affairs one as well if you want, and I'll make sure that Keith gets that.
I need to tell you something about your survey. It doesn't allow you to choose more than one option for how you use the Harlem River right now. Could you just check on that on your IT side? Because that's crucial that you have more than one use.
For sure.
I just checked that out. Thank you.
You know, we also failed to introduce our consultant team. I'm not going to introduce them each by name, but I just want to recognize that we were joined tonight by HDR, and I see Trent Stover just turned on his camera. And I know Tim was jumping in, and we have Victoria somewhere out there. I saw her name, but I just wanted to say that, you know, we're very pleased to have them on board because they do a tremendous amount of technical work and support. And these guys are like among the best in the business. And I know because I work with a lot of the municipalities across the country. And we're very fortunate to have HDR here. So please, you know, do send us your comments, but know that we're being guided and advised by HDR. And, you know, of course, the work that Keith's been built his whole career on this. So we just want to say that we're very proud of the work that we're producing. And we certainly welcome your comments and, you know, hope that we can provide the proper feedback for the community to better understand where we're going with this river.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a bunch, Angela, and thanks for the opportunity to serve the city. And that was a great point, Bob. That was, I think it's just a toggle probably to switch the survey to be able to pick multiple uses. So thanks for
Yeah, I
seeing
think
that
we
so
can fix that.
quickly.
Yep.
We'll get that fixed up.
And I'll resend the link around as well when I send a follow-up email as well. So you'll have all that, everything in one place. All right. Thank you, everybody, so much for your time. Appreciate it. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye now.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.